Talk a bit about Scott Frost and what he's meant to the coaching staff since he's been here in '09.
Scotty came in, when I first took over as head coach, along with Mark Helfrich and Jerry Azzinaro, and I think the stability of this coaching staff is really one of the pluses. I've never had to go really interview anybody since I become a head coach, and the fact that all of us are together for our third year. Everybody has a unique personality on our staff, but I think everybody has the common goal of understanding that what the mission is for this football program and how it's supposed to look. And Scott fit in right from day one, just like Mark did and just like Az did, which I think was unique because you've got some guys that had been here 20 some odd years, when Nick and Don Pelham and Steve Greatwood and Jimmy Radcliffe and whatnot. But the great thing about our staff, I think, is the chemistry of our staff and how well we all get along. And Scott's done a great job. You look at the production that our receivers have, kind of flourished under him. I think the toughness that he brings to that position, really it says a lot in terms of how those guys are. And as I told Scott, he's gonna earn his paycheck now because Jeff and Drew are gone. So how does he bring those young receivers along? But I got a ton of confidence that he's going to get those guys ready to play.
Heading back to the it's even work.
It's like a psychic thing.
Heading back to the offensive line, can you talk a little bit about the situation at center and if you're concerned about the lack of experience?
Another good question, but I can't be concerned because our center's gone. So, I could stay up nights and worry because Jordan Holmes is not here, but he's not coming back. So, we're going to have to play somebody in our opening game that hasn't taken snaps for us, and that's just the reality of it. And it was the same thing 2 years ago, when Max Unger graduated and then Jordan had to take over for him. That's just the natural process that goes on, and it'll be a battle. I think in the spring it was Carrington Armstrong and Ronas Grasu who were really competing for the job, and now with Amani coming back off his mission, it'll be interesting to see where he is. And he'll get some, he was a center before he left, so he'll get some reps at center, and then we'll try to solidify it much like we do our quarterback position. That may be a decision that will go right up until that first week, and then once we get really into the nuts and bolts of game week against LSU, then we're going to have to figure it out. But whoever's snapping for us in the LSU game, it'll be first time because we had the luxury of Max Unger for 3 years, and then we had the luxury of Jordan for 3 years. So it's going to be a new guy, and I got confidence in their ability. They just have never played, so you're really not going to know what you get until you put them out there in that opener. So.
Coach, one of the questions for this season is how this young team, as you pointed out, is going to handle all the national attention with what's going on with the investigation. What will you tell them today, as the season starts, about that and how to deal with it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've told them the same thing that I said 2 weeks ago, is that I think the media around here is the smartest people I've ever been around in my entire life, and if they voted us #1 in the conference and #3 in the country, then they must not think it's a distraction, so we shouldn't let it be a distraction. Because I don't think anyone would vote us to be #3 in the country if you guys thought it was a distraction, so that's how we discussed it, and about that was the only thing I ever said about it, so we're getting ready to play LSU.
And then I just wanted to ask you, because since you were at Pac-12 Media Day a couple weeks ago, there was a pretty high-profile national column of a national columnist saying that Chip Kelly had to go. How confident are you, when this is all said and done, that you are still going to be the head coach here?
Well, I hope whoever wrote that, and I didn't read it, isn't our athletic director or our president. So, and I'm very confident in everything that will happen. So. Well, one thing we run our whole program is we don't run our program based on outside influences, and I don't mean it to be a shot or whatever, but we don't read any of that stuff, so it really doesn't affect our thought process. Our thought process solely now is really how do we have a very, very good practice this afternoon.
Coach, on that note, a lot of fans had so much pride for what you accomplished last year. What would you say to them who maybe are concerned right now of what's going on, waiting for the results of the investigation, and maybe even a little chagrined about what's happened? What would you say to fans that ended on such a high note and are wondering what's going to happen next?
I don't know what's going to happen next, and it's whether our game's going to, how our season's going to pan out, or all those other things. I think that's what no one knows what happens in the future. But as I said 2 weeks ago, is that the NCAA is in the middle of a process of examining and going through it. We also asked an outside law firm to come in and take a look at it, and once that information is available to everybody, we'll make sure that we make it public. So.
Do you like the fact you said you haven't been together since April 30th? Do you like the fact that after this long off season you can get these guys back together and maybe it's an us versus them type of mentality again, like last year, kind of the way you put it together?
We didn't have an us versus them mentality last year, so we have the same mentality all the time. Is we have a vision for what this football program is supposed to be about, and we prepare against that vision and we go out and compete against that vision every Saturday, and that's how we measure ourselves, and that's what we're concerned with. We're not concerned with any outside influences, whether it be praise or blame. It's all the same to us.
With so many spread offenses now being used, our defense is catching up a little bit. Of course, I know you're very successful, but you spend a lot of time in the summer trying to tweak and come up with different ideas to counterbalance what defenses are now doing. Is that a fun thing for you?
The X and O part of the game is always fun for us, and I think our staff, you know, that's one of the things that they really excel at, is really how can we be productive, whether it's offensively or defensively. So, you know, that's the fun part of coaching, is the, you know, the X and O part. And I don't think, and I've said this all along, there's not one magic formula to stop what people are doing. And if it was, everybody would do it. You know, it's not do this and you stop this. This game has been, always will be, and will continue to be about players. And when you have players, it's about how well can you get them to execute and then get out of their way and let them make plays. But, you know, if you have a spread offense but you don't have a great running back, then it's going to be very difficult for you. Or if you have a spread offense and, you know, I've looked at teams a couple years ago and you're like, wow, that's the greatest offense in the world, and then that quarterback graduates and they become average again. You know, this game, college football, has always been about the players and always will continue to be about the players. And, you know, we've been fortunate in the 4 years that I've been here is that we've had some really, really good players. And if we can continue to get kids like Darren Thomas, the Michael James, and whoever the next Darren Thomas or the Michael James is, and I think we'll be successful. But it's not a scheme. I think there's so much blown over about the scheme that I think there's too much credit given to that, to be honest with you.
You mentioned LaMichael. Just talk about how you can maybe get playing time for LaMichael and Barner, and plus we have Seastrunk, just the depth you have at running back and where you're going to find ways to get those guys on the field.
Well, I would argue with anybody that we don't have depth at running back. We have two players that have played football for us, and LaMichael James and Kenyon Barner, and then after that, there's a lot of inexperience. So who those guys are going to be after Kenyon and LaMichael is really a big question for us, and that's what we need to find out here during camp. But I know our coaching staff is smart enough to get Kenyon and LaMichael in the game at the same time, but we also have to be conscious that we can't run the two of those guys into the ground, because right now we only have two proven commodities at that position. So we always like the luxury of, is you take LaMichael out of the game and you insert Kenyon into the game, that you haven't missed anything. You know, and there are times where those two guys will play together. They played you know, a fair amount of snaps in the national championship game at the same time, but you can't have LaMichael on the field for 60 snaps and Kenyon on the field for 60 snaps and then expect us to last an entire 12-game season, especially with the schedule that we have. So we'll closely monitor what they have. You know, LaMichael carried a big load when Kenyon got knocked out, you know, in the Washington State game, and we missed him for a couple games. You know, there was a couple 30-carry games. We probably don't want to have him carry the ball that often, but I think the one thing as a coaching staff you're comfortable with is that if he has to, you know, he can because of his toughness. But I really think the big question mark in camp is who will be our third running back that emerges through this camp. So.
Chip, have you had a chance to meet with Kiko and Cliff yet? Any clarity on when either one of them might first play?
No, you know, really today's the first time I've got a chance to talk to them. I've talked to both those guys a couple times over the summer just to check in and see how they're doing, and it'll be an ongoing evaluation process to figure out exactly where they are with it. But they'll be back out. You know, first step is to come back with the team and start practicing and doing those things. But there has been no determination by our coaching staff in terms of playing time as we get going towards the fall.